Before the coin, before the banknote, and certainly before the credit card, there was the barter system. Imagine trying to trade a goat for a spear. The goat is alive, the spear is sharp. How many arrows equal a cow? It was inefficient, subjective, and often led to conflict. Humanity needed a universal translator. It needed a medium that, long before banks, before coins, and before the concept of money even had a name, human beings faced a fundamental problem. How do you trade value fairly? Imagine you are a farmer with a surplus of wheat, but you need a new axe. The blacksmith has axes, but he does not need wheat. He needs leather. The tanner has leather, but she needs pottery. The potter needs wheat. This endless chain of coincidences made trade slow, frustrating, and inefficient. This was the barter system, and for thousands of years it was the only way to exchange goods. But barter had fatal flaws. How many chickens equal a cow? What happens if the cow dies the next day? Value was subjective, arguments were constant, and without a common measure of worth, economic growth was severely limited. Humanity needed a universal translator, something that everyone agreed had value, something durable, divisible, portable, and scarce. That something was metal. But the journey from raw ore to the coins in your pocket, and ultimately to the digital transactions of today, took over 5,000 years. This is the story of how metal turned into money. The first metals to capture human imagination were not iron or steel. They were the ones found naturally in the earth in pure form: copper, silver, and gold. These metals were beautiful. They shimmered. They did not corrode or decay. Early civilizations in Mesopotamia, the Indus Valley, and Egypt began collecting these metals not as money, but as symbols of status, power, and divine favor. Gold was associated with the sun and the gods. Silver was linked to the moon. These metals were fashioned into jewelry, ceremonial objects, and religious idols. But soon, practical minds realized something crucial. These metals were also the perfect medium for trade. A bushel of wheat could rot, a goat could die, but a ring of copper could last for centuries. By around 3000 BCE, the Sumerians in Mesopotamia were using silver as a standard of value. However, they did not use coins. Instead, they used the weight system. A merchant would carry a set of scales and pieces of silver of varying sizes. When making a purchase, the silver was weighed out. This system spread across the ancient world. In Egypt, the deben became the standard unit, roughly 91 grams of copper or silver. The state decreed what a deben could buy: bread, beer, meat, and textiles. This was a massive leap forward. For the first time, a central authority was defining value, creating trust in a system that had previously relied only on personal negotiation. No civilization in the ancient world was more associated with metal wealth than Egypt. The pharaohs controlled the gold mines of Nubia and the eastern desert, making Egypt the richest kingdom of its time. Gold was so abundant in Egypt that it was considered the skin of the gods. But interestingly, Egypt never developed a true coinage system for most of its 3,000-year history. Instead, they perfected the weight system. Egyptian art frequently depicts scribes meticulously weighing gold rings against stone weights on balanced scales. These rings were not random. They followed strict weight standards. The innovation in Egypt was the combination of state authority, religious legitimacy, and standardized weights. When a pharaoh stamped his cartouche on a weight or a ring, he was guaranteeing its value. Trust was no longer between two merchants. Trust was placed in the crown. Egypt also introduced the concept of fractional banking in a primitive form. Grain stored in state warehouses was used as a form of currency, with receipts issued against it. These receipts could be traded. Metal remained the ultimate store of wealth, but paper receipts representing metal and grain began to appear. The seed of representative money was planted. Yet the true revolution in metal currency was about to erupt in a small kingdom across the sea. In the 7th century BCE, in the kingdom of Lydia, located in what is now modern Turkey, a monumental innovation occurred. The Lydians discovered a natural alloy of gold and silver called electrum. They began shaping this electrum into small, uniform lumps and stamping them with a design, initially a lion's head, the symbol of the Lydian kings. This was the first true coin.
Why was this such a breakthrough? Because for the first time, the value of the metal was guaranteed by the state's stamp. Previously, every transaction required weighing the metal and testing its purity. With the Lydian coin, a merchant could simply count the pieces. The stamp was a promise. This piece of metal has a specific weight and a specific purity. You do not need to test it. You do not need to weigh it. You simply trust it. The Lydian innovation spread rapidly to the Greek city-states. The Greeks saw the potential immediately. They began minting their own coins, first in electrum, then in pure silver. The Athenian tetradrachm, featuring the owl of Athena, became the most trusted currency of the ancient Mediterranean. It was accepted from Athens to Egypt to Babylon. For the first time in history, a single currency facilitated international trade on a massive scale. Metal had officially become money.
The Romans took the Greek concept of coinage and transformed it into an instrument of imperial power. The denarius, a silver coin first minted around 211 BCE, became the currency that unified the Mediterranean world. Rome understood something that previous civilizations had only glimpsed. Money is not just a tool for trade, it is a tool for control. Roman soldiers were paid in denarii. Roman taxes were collected in denarii. Roman merchants traded across 3 continents using the same silver pieces. The denarius created a shared economic identity across the empire. A Gaul in France, a Greek in Anatolia, and a Berber in North Africa all recognized the value of the same coin. But Rome also provided the first great lesson in the fragility of metal currency. As the empire expanded, military costs skyrocketed. Emperors faced constant pressure to pay their legions. Instead of raising taxes, many emperors took a shortcut. They debased the coinage. Under Nero, the silver content of the denarius was reduced. By the time of Emperor Caracalla in the 3rd century, the denarius contained almost no silver at all, just a thin silver wash over a copper core. The face value remained the same, but the intrinsic value vanished. The result was catastrophic inflation. Prices soared. Trust in the currency evaporated, trade ground to a halt. The Roman economy never fully recovered, and the debasement of metal money contributed directly to the collapse of the Western Roman Empire. The lesson was clear: even metal money is only as valuable as the trust behind it. The Crusades brought European merchants into direct contact with the sophisticated markets of the Arab world. Italian city-states like Florence, Venice, and Genoa quickly adopted and improved upon the monetary systems they encountered. In 1252, Florence minted the florin, a gold coin that would dominate European trade for centuries. Venice followed with the ducat. These gold coins were pure, reliable, and trusted. They became the international currency of the Renaissance, just as the Athenian owl had been in antiquity. But the discovery of the Americas in 1492 changed everything. Spanish conquistadors looted the Aztec and Inca empires and then opened the vast silver mines of Potosi in modern-day Bolivia. Between 1500 and 1800, Spain extracted an estimated 150,000 tons of silver from the Americas. This flood of metal caused a price revolution in Europe, a prolonged period of inflation as the supply of money outstripped the supply of goods. Silver became so abundant that its value relative to gold plummeted. Metal money was no longer scarce, and its value became volatile. Meanwhile, the physical weight of metal was becoming an obstacle to trade. The Swedes attempted to create massive copper plate money, large, heavy slabs of copper weighing up to 15 kilograms. They were absurdly impractical. A merchant buying a ship would need a cart just to transport the payment. The solution had been known for centuries, thanks to the Arab sack system. Goldsmiths in London began issuing receipts for gold deposited with them. Soon, these receipts began circulating as money. People realized it was safer and easier to trade the paper receipt than to move the heavy gold. The banknote was born. By the 18th century, most European nations had established central banks that issued paper currency redeemable for gold or silver. This was the gold standard. The value of paper money was directly tied to a fixed quantity of metal held in reserve. For the next 150 years, the world operated on this system. Metal sat in vaults, and paper circulated in its place. The link between metal and money remained, but it had become indirect. The 20th century shattered the ancient bond between metal and money. World War I forced nations to abandon the gold standard to print unlimited money for war expenses. After the war, attempts to return to gold led to deflation and economic instability. The Great Depression of the 1930s delivered the final blow. Countries that clung to gold suffered the most. People hoarded gold, worsening the crisis. Governments realized that the metal itself had become a constraint on economic growth and stability. After World War II, the Bretton Woods system attempted a compromise. The American dollar would be convertible to gold at $35 per ounce, and all other currencies would be pegged to the dollar. This system lasted until August 15, 1971. On that day, President Richard Nixon announced that the United States would suspend the convertibility of the dollar into gold. This was the Nixon shock. With a single speech, the 5,000-year link between metal and money was severed. The world entered the era of fiat money. Fiat is a Latin word meaning by decree. A dollar bill, a euro, a yen, none of these are backed by gold or silver. They have value because the government decrees that they are legal tender and because the public trusts the stability of the issuing nation.
So did metals stop being money? Not exactly. Gold and silver are still bought and sold. Central banks hold gold reserves. Investors buy gold as a hedge against inflation and economic uncertainty. But gold is no longer the money of everyday transactions. It has become a commodity and an investment asset. The money in your wallet and the digits in your bank account are purely digital abstractions. They exist because of trust in institutions, not because of metal in a vault. And now we are witnessing the next evolution. Cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin emerged in 2009 as a digital alternative to government-issued money. Interestingly, Bitcoin was designed to mimic the properties that made metal a good form of money. It is scarce, only 21 million will ever exist. It is durable, divisible, and decentralized. Many call it digital gold. The metal is gone, but the blueprint remains.
From the copper rings of ancient Egypt to the silver denarius of Rome, from the gold dinars of the Islamic caliphates to the paper notes of the Renaissance, and finally to the digital transactions of the 21st century, the story of how metal turned into money is ultimately the story of human trust. We started by trusting the weight of the metal. Then we trusted the stamp of the king. Then we trusted the signature of the banker. Today, we trust the code on a screen. Metal gave us the template. Money must be durable, divisible, portable, and scarce. We have abstracted that template into ever more sophisticated forms, but the foundation remains the same. Money is a shared story, a collective agreement that something, whether it is a gold coin or a digital token, represents value. And that story began 5,000 years ago when humanity first looked at a shining piece of metal and decided to trust it.